Okay, thank you. So we are reconvening for the last interview with our final candidate, Mr. Michael Gaal. So Colonel Michael Gaal, with that on the behalf of the board and District 11 community, Colonel Gaal, welcome to Colorado Springs School District 11. I'm going to read a brief bio that I have about you. Michael Gaal is an accomplished leader with more than 30 years of service-centered experiences across multiple sectors and disciplines. Prior to his candidacy for Superintendent of District 11, Michael served as Deputy Chancellor of Washington, D.C. Public Schools, Chief of Staff of Oakland Unified School District, and both Chief Operation Officer and Elementary Superintendent for Education Achievement Authority of Michigan. His private sector experiences include President of Sales for an education technology company and Chief Operations Officer, and later President of an energy management company, primarily supporting school districts and universities. Michael is a retired Air Force colonel with deep experiences in flight instruction, mobility operations, and national strategy policy development. Michael's students' first mantra and understanding of the needs of schools and students drive his urgency and passion to ensure all students are loved, challenged, and prepared. With that, Colonel Gaal, the board is pleased to have you as one of the top 3 candidates for superintendent position and to host you for the past couple of days. I hope you had an excellent and productive visit to our schools yesterday. The board appreciates you taking the time, interacting with our various stakeholder groups, staff, parents, community members, and students. Hopefully you got to learn a little bit more about our district through those interactions. So we have about 24 questions for you to answer.
Only 24.
Yeah, only 24. And you have a copy of the questions in front of you too. So if you want to follow along, there must be a question packet in front of you. Okay. We have approximately 90 minutes to get through those 24 questions, and we'll stop around 9:30. I will provide reminders along the way as far as the time that's remaining, and we'll see how far we get to. And if we have time in the end, we can even open it up where you can address the board and ask a couple of questions in the end. And you roughly have 3 to 4 minutes of answer time for each question, but that's not set in stone. We'll let you pace yourself. Some questions may need a longer response and others are a little shorter. So, but we do want you to certainly take the time to share all the information you think the board should consider as we make this critical decision. And the board will take rotations asking those questions. With that, let's get started. Colonel Gaal, the board has had the opportunity to review your application materials, watch your video response, conduct a personal interview with you a couple of weeks back, and also hear from our search consultants. Having said that, this is your first time in front of the larger D11 community. So going to question 1, please share with the community your background, both professional and personal, and why you want to be the next superintendent of schools in District 11. Please specifically consider highlighting things that may not be readily evident in your application file.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Let's start. We can go by Mr. Gaal. I'm very proud of my military career, but Uncle Sam's not calling me anytime soon, so I'm Mr. Gaal. Mike is actually preferred, but I understand the formality of the interview here today. I'd like to start, first of all, with some acknowledgments, my sympathies for the challenges that Director Dr. Bankus for not being able to be here tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge, if anyone hasn't been paying attention to the news, the challenges in Uvalde, Texas today, yet once again, senseless loss of life on school grounds. I'm not sure if that'll be a question here, but something that should be in the back of all of our minds as we think about our responsibilities as community members, parents, staff, and the senior governance team here up on the dais. Some other thank yous. I would really like to thank the board for providing me the opportunity to be here. It is coming home for me, and I'll touch on that just a little bit here. But before I forget, I really want to thank Brian, who was the executive director who got to sponsor me for the last 2 days, and the time that he has extended in driving me around town and hearing me ask, where's Red Top, and is Fuddruckers still open, and can I go play pool at Pinky's when we're done, and all these places that if you're from Colorado Springs you remember, but maybe fortunately or unfortunately aren't here anymore. But it is really nice to be here again. And then very specifically to the 4 schools that hosted not just myself, but the other 2 candidates, and for the constituent groups that made the time and the effort to ask the pointed questions that they need to know to ensure that they are vetting and finding out what the next leader of District 11, who they will be and why they will be here. And then the final thank you would be to the students that I was able to engage with. I know the worst thing a principal can deal with is a rogue administrator wandering buildings and just poking their heads in and asking kids. But I will tell you, bar none, to every student that I talk to, they love their district, they love their school, and they love their teachers. Not a single student could give me an area of improvement, and every one of them to a T, and I must have talked to about a dozen students, said their favorite thing about their school was their teachers. And so there are things that are happening and working well in District 11, and I think some of the challenges is just how we get that message and how we get that coherency together to make sure that we can accelerate. Very briefly about me, like I said, I started my professional life here in Colorado Springs. July 5th, 1985, I got off an airplane and I saw Pikes Peak. I grew up in New Jersey. I'd literally never been west of the Delaware River, and maybe 2 miles west of the Delaware River. And I looked up at Pikes Peak and I started cursing my parents, and I said, why didn't you tell me that this is what the rest of the country looked like? I fell in love with Colorado the minute I landed here. My niece is at the Air Force Academy right now. I was with her last night for dinner, and we pulled over on the side of the road outside of the north gate, and I said, I parked here the day before graduation and I watched the Thunderbirds fly as they were doing their practice for graduation. And she said, why, because you wanted to see the Thunderbirds? And I said, no, because I was crying. And she said, why were you crying? And I said, because I knew I was never going to have a chance to live in Colorado Springs again. The world works in mysterious ways. I came back in the early 90s to teach at the Air Force Academy, and that's where I started my family. My daughter was born one of the last births at what used to be the Academy Hospital, which is now just a small clinic to support the personnel there. Colorado Springs has always been very personal and professional to me. As I was sharing with members earlier, I come back to Colorado often. If you don't know, Epic Ski Company, the Vail Resorts, gives a military pass for about $100 to $150 for retired military. So if it's snowing, I'm on my way to Denver and I'm on I-70 westbound no matter where I've lived. I love it here. I feel comfortable here. I drove across the district for the last 3 days. I visited from the outside every school to make sure I understood what the challenges were for buildings and for neighborhoods. So now slightly to why I think I should have this job. I think that this is a very unique time for District 11. I have been working with school districts since the day I retired, and I'll tell you why I got there, for the last 8 years, either in direct control and administrative positions or in providing supports and services to those school districts. One of the greatest risks to our country right now is the failure of K-12 education. And so on May 31st, 1989, I took an oath of office as a brand new officer that said I would support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We have a domestic threat in our country right now. It is being felt first and foremost in District 11. You just have to look at the report card and the numbers to see that what we say that we are doing is not landing correctly to students. It's not anybody's fault, it's everybody's fault. And when it's everybody's fault, it means we all need to lean in together. When it's a single person's fault, it's easy. You fire your way through that. But that's not where we are. The failure in the system is systemic. I bring systems level leadership across 3 different sectors in how you provide turnaround and strategy to deliver outcomes. I have the utmost respect for all the other candidates for this opportunity, as well as I do for all the professionals within the system. But what the system needs right now is strong, strategic leadership who are not afraid to make very hard decisions that will pay off in the out years. We have tons of leading indicators right now that are telling us that the little things that we're trying to trim on will not make the difference in the out years. Some board members will be up for election soon. Some have just been recently elected. Remember, it takes at least 13 years for us to make the product pre-K to 12. That's a long time. So changes that we make in pre-K next year will take us 13 years to see that full result. Most of us won't still be here. Somebody has to be on point to recognize that that representation needs to be on our backs. So I look forward to further questions.
Great. You had the opportunity to research District 11. What would you consider the strengths of the district, and what are the areas of improvement or systemic changes needed that present the best opportunities for success?
Yeah, like I said, I'm just very happy to be here. District 11 makes me feel at home. I'm reminded of what Colorado Springs meant to me so many years ago and the messaging I heard from Colorado Springs so many years ago. When I came back here in 1992 and I went to buy my first house, I looked at a house on the west side in District 11. I think it was off of White Buffalo was the name of the street. I wasn't pre-approved. I had no idea what I was doing. I was in my 20s. I called the realtor on the sign, and the realtor said to me, well, you got to go through all these processes. And she said, but don't you want to buy in District 20? And I didn't know the difference between any district. I had no kids at the time. But in 1992, realtors were telling me that I should buy in District 20. And now here we are 30 years later, and people are still telling us that you should buy in District 20 or District 38 and move yourself north and not have your kids in District 11. When I visited schools and I saw the passion of the teachers and I saw the personal connections with students, by name, funny handshakes, TikTok jokes, moving, let's get back in class, always on point, I realized that the strength of this district is in its understanding of who it is and where it's been. Now, what it needs is to understand where it's going. So I also love history. Clearly, as a military officer, I understand that we need to learn from our past, but just the basic language that I hear about District 11 looks too far backwards and not far enough forwards. I got tours of alumni rooms in many of the high schools that I went to. I want to celebrate that, but what I really want to see is what's the programming that's coming online for students next year. I am very proud, would be very proud to say that this is the longest standing school district in Colorado Springs. But what I really want that is to then be attached to, and it is where the premier outcomes are occurring for students. And that means all students. And so it's time for District 11 to move from celebrating its past to position itself for the future. Very clearly, there are two huge problems on the table right now. And we have to get them in the right order. What you will hear first and foremost is enrollment. The numbers are clear, it's easy to measure, there are heat maps, there are Tableau charts, we know the number of families on certain blocks that are opting in or out. That is a very real challenge. But that challenge is a symptom of a larger issue. The larger issue is the report card that shows that I believe it's 5% of black children are reaching proficiency in math in 2021, and 9% of Hispanic children are reaching proficiency in 2021. That is a challenge. Do I have that answer in my back pocket? Boy, I wish I did, because then we could solve a lot of problems. I do believe the answers are here in the district. I think what it needs is a systems level leader who can tie it all together. It's not a new program, it's a system. It's how you change core instruction and align all the resources of the district around that singular initiative. That's the work that we choose to do together, and I'm excited to be able to partner here to do that.
Okay, thank you. How do you envision leading District 11 to improve student outcomes, specifically increasing student achievement and graduation rates for all demographics of students? And what is a typical time frame to observe these noticeable district-wide improvements in student outcomes?
Great, we're going right after it. This is awesome. I want to remind folks that although I'm a non-traditional candidate, I have my experiences in schools, and very specifically Detroit, Oakland, and Washington, D.C. And if you think our numbers are bad in District 11, you just have to go look at what's happening in some of those cities to understand that those challenges exist in almost every school in those cities. And we have pockets of very strong performance in District 11, which gives us a huge opportunity to accelerate that timeline for us to close the gap in the schools and in the demographics that are least served. I'm going to give a couple of examples. I'll put a little bit of a framework out here first. I think it starts with coherence. I think it is then followed with faster cycles of review or improvement, and I think it's supported through collaboration and coaching. I'll give a couple of examples in my roles in districts to show how I've seen that and what those outcomes were. For coherence, when I went to Detroit, these were the bottom 10% of schools in the city of Detroit were pulled out and taken over by the state. And so I want to be careful that everybody understands that. Taken over by the state. That is a real threat for several schools in District 11. Don't think that CDE isn't already thinking about it. If you read the Atlantic article that was published this morning, the state of Massachusetts is thinking about taking over Boston Public Schools. States are tired of school districts not achieving. States feel that they're on the hook for that. So I was in a state turnaround effort in Detroit. In there, we brought coherence. What we had were disjointed curriculum, assessments, instructional strategies, and I'll just call them ed tech resource supports. And we put that on the backs of teachers to be able to create the crosswalks. What's the difference between the DIBEL? What's the Lexile level? What's the reading level for the books that were supported in the library? That's too much for teachers to have to do. We need coherence in the strategy that we want to be executed in the classroom. That's on central office to be able to provide that. I'm very happy to hear that there's been a new assessment adopted, and I'm also happy to hear that the interim assessments sound like we're getting to coherence. I understand there are still some bugs. We can get focused and some action planning and snap that right up. I'm happy to be able to do that. When we did that specifically in Detroit, we saw double the growth in our 8th graders in math because we were able to actually, really the real key was, I had a relationship with the ed tech supplier. It was the Alex Math program, if you're familiar with that. And I had that consultant rebuild the scope and sequence to match the curriculum we were using in Engage New York at the time, which was early Common Core. This is back in 2014. And we had them match that, and such that when students were on the EdTech platform, it was actually connected to the lesson that they were taught for the day. It seems like common sense. That coherence doubled our proficiency from the low 20s to the mid 50s in 1 year alone. When I was in Oakland, I want to be specific here on the actual work that we were able to do on cycles, is we brought learning walks to the instructional team. We realized that we needed to accept the fact that no matter how hard we might have been trying as an individual or as a small team, we might not still be achieving. It's okay to ask for help. Most of us are programmed to want to be successful. The irony for me in that is it's counter to what we teach our children. We tell our children to say, if you need something, ask for something. But yet as adults, probably because we're worried about employability, we feel that, oh my gosh, I have to be able to do this by myself. So we put learning walks and PLCs in when I was in Oakland, and we doubled our proficiency. It was specifically ELA was the first year introduction that we had in our middle school years. I cannot talk enough about the good work that's happening in DC public schools. And I am very proud of what we were able to do there. And I think that really gets to what needs to happen here in District 11. And it is about getting coaching and collaboration into the classroom for more rigorous and higher standards Tier 1 core instruction. We have to set high expectations for our kids. We know that when we set those expectations and deliver the resources and supports for them to be able to get there, that children will always exceed our expectations. I hear oftentimes in mission and vision statements that we want our kids to meet their potential. If I met my potential on what somebody met me in 6th grade, I would not be sitting here today. We want our kids to exceed their potential. Their potential is limitless. We have no idea what their future is going to be. If we get focused and we start bringing in that focus to Tier 1 core instruction, you'll actually find that you don't need all the remedies in Tier 2 and Tier 3. There becomes an over-reliance as you get to black and brown children or children that are lower socioeconomical and falling behind to over-rely on Tier 2 and Tier 3 remediations. Remediations are not proven to get the gap closure that you need. There's an article in the Atlantic today written by a senior member of the NWEA team, NWEA, that's always so hard to say, their team that says the average loss due to COVID is 22 weeks or more. And the commentary from that third-party position was, I've yet to see a remediation that can close 22 weeks of learning. And so, and their recommendation was extended day, extended year, everywhere in the country. So coherence, cycles, collaboration, and coaching. And when we get to a follow-on question, I'll tell you how I plan to do that here in District 11. Or if you want it right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a community question. Increasing student enrollment in District 11 is paramount for our success, or to our success. What will be your specific plan to accomplish this priority?
And this was enrollment for the community, is that what you said? I'm sorry, I missed the word in your mask.
Yes, I apologize. Maybe I
That's
should
okay.
get closer to the mic.
No, you're good,
Maybe.
thank you. It just brings the pace up a little bit.
Yes, I understand.
So I already said I thought the two largest challenges, enrollment is directly connected to academic performance. We have to do what I call a micro and a macro strategy. The micro strategy, and I'll give you an example of what I did when I first came to Detroit. We too were bleeding kids. We were the bottom 10% of kids within the city. If you could opt out, you were opting out. There was schools of choice. And so there was this great inequity in choice, which meant if you were still in one of my schools, it meant you couldn't figure out how to exercise your way to get out. So what we did, and they were neighborhood schools, is we launched a summer grassroots campaign. And we took a principal, an instructional coach, and any one member of an after-school or in-school additional program, whether it be arts or robotics. And we went door to door all summer long and knocked on families' doors. And we handed out flyers, and we had conversations, and we talked to grandmas, and we talked to aunts, and we talked to foster parents, and we had movie nights on Friday nights when the school was closed. And yes, we paid our staff to be able to do that. We were fortunate that we had some foundation money from the local foundation who saw the critical nature to enrollment and funding and survivability of the system. So we went after it as old school as you can get it. And I can tell you, walking the streets of Detroit for a whole summer in July, you lose a lot of weight and you'll learn a lot about a city. I treasured that time. It was great. You learn a lot about what the needs of the community are, and you get the chance to dispel the rumor mill face to face. And so I have, as I said to board members that I met outside earlier, it's great to meet them in person because I see them on TV all the time as I've been watching all the board meetings. But I hear all this angst around central office hired a marketing director. And that it's not the marketing director's job to solve the message that we talk about in District 11. It's the marketing director's job to help us build the collateral, because I'm not really good at PowerPoint, I can't make a video. It's our job then to market. All of us have to be singing the praises of District 11. I commit right here, I'll live within boundary of District 11. Okay, I'm not against families that don't live within boundary District 11, but I promise you, if you live near the school that you teach, you talk a lot more positively about the school that you teach at, and you know more about what's happening in the community. And so that's the micro strategy. The macro strategy is we just really have to decide what do we want to be when we grow up. The district has been shrinking steadily, some of it because of low academic performance, and some of it because District 11 is kind of landlocked. I drove, as I said, to every school in the last 2 days, and I'm really not seeing a lot of new housing development. I'm just not seeing it. And I was happy to see the strength of communities and the numbers supported in the Northeast, happy to see the strength in the communities and the numbers for neighborhood utilization on the west side, and in some pockets near, I'll call it the north side of Pete Field. But I was greatly concerned when I landed on Sunday to see that the big bet that said, let's build a south entrance into the airport has turned into nothing but blight and zero economic development. Now, that's a larger conversation between District 11 and City Council and the mayor, and how do we get some economic development over there. But I looked at the numbers, and Krista McAuliffe Elementary School had a net loss of 89 kids, I think it is, for last year on permits, where they had been kind of steady for the 3 years prior to that. And of those 89 kids, I think 74 of them went to Henry, which says that families have decided, I don't want to be there anymore, I want to be here. Those schools are only like 1.5 miles apart, right? So think about what it says when you choose to not go to the school that's in your neighborhood. I'm all for school choice, but you have to be so dissatisfied to say that I'm not going to the school that is near the house that I bought, is across the street from the house that my mom and dad grew up. The depth of legacy in District 11 is miles deep, but people are opting to drive right by the school that they grew up in or was right around the corner because they're not satisfied with the experience. So we can message that, that's part of the micro. The macro is we just need to really think, why do we have a school here, and who is it that we intended to serve? I ran the numbers, and I might be off by a little bit, but it looks like there's about 6,000 in-district families who are choosing to not go to their, what would be their assigned school. And there's somewhere between 20 and 23,000 families that live within District 11. And so do your math real quick. That's somewhere between 25 and 30% of the families that say, I'm not satisfied. That is a crisis. I don't have the answer yet. I'm thinking hard about it. I like what I see in the academic master plan because I fundamentally believe that people want neighborhood schools, particularly at the elementary level. But if you haven't seen the graphic that shows what's happening at the high school level, I really think that people want choice in high school. I think we're creating very niche experiences in our high school that kids and families can navigate, because District 11 isn't that big for my 16-year-old to get to school, but it's really big for my 6-year-old to get to school. So we have to do better at the elementary level. And there's another massive opportunity that maybe I don't understand the Colorado law yet, but I'll put it in the frame of what we did in DC. In DC, they went with universal pre-K, and we grabbed that faster than the charters could get it. And you need to understand, in DC, we were 50% of the kids were served by DCPS, which is District of Columbia Public Schools. The other 50% were served by the charter sector. So 50,000 kids go to charter schools in Washington, D.C., and 50,000 kids go to traditional school. So if you think you have a charter challenge here, you have no idea. But when they went to universal pre-K, we went and we said, we are going to provide the maximum amount of space that we can for every pre-K age child within the boundary of that school. Because the sooner I can get them, the sooner I can love them, challenge them, and prepare them. And it became a conduit for enrollment. Because once you come to the school, it's a creature of habit. You're satisfied. I've loved every teacher and principal that I've met so far. I know that if I can get people back in the building, that they'll want to stay there. So I think there's a huge opportunity that could challenge some of the enrollment issues if we think about not just, well, it's just, they're only going to fund half-day pre-K, and we do currently offer a class. If there are 3 kindergarten classrooms in an elementary school, we ought to be thinking about 3 pre-K classrooms before it. Because you go from 3 kindergarten classrooms to 3 first-grade classrooms to 3 second-grade classrooms. So why limit ourselves to just 1 pre-K classroom per building? That's a bunch.
What do you accept as evidence that teachers are effectively teaching and students are effectively learning?
So let's start, let's go backwards on, because it really comes to if students are learning. What I know, and I'll go back to my own time, as a flight instructor, there's nothing more satisfying than what I call the light bulb of learning clicking on. When you have a teacher and student relationship and you see a student get it, you feel so, or at least I feel very satisfied. I feel really great that the knowledge and the information that I try to impart has been demonstrated. So I think there's a couple of ways that we assess children. There are state standardized tests. Sorry, I'm not going to come here, I'm not going to promise you that we're going to get rid of standardized testing, that all that's going to go away. I don't have that authority. I'd be happy to go up and talk to CDE about what the challenges are there, but we have to accept that there are going to be standardized tests that are, we're going to measure student performance. But the state of Colorado recognizes growth. And so growth is an opportunity for us to acknowledge that not all students are at grade level, but we want to see that students are moving in that direction. So I do like the fact that the performance framework at the state level uses a balance of growth as well as the standards that are met. But I also think that we're missing an opportunity. And anybody who spends time in schools knows that you don't need any assessment to know whether or not teaching and learning is happening. You walk into a classroom, you look at the 4 kids in the back, and you see, are they engaged or are they not engaged? Now, they're not always disengaged because they're not learning. They might have already accomplished the task. But it's very easy to get a feel for if the learning is happening on site. So I think that goes to the teacher effectiveness piece, which is one of the models that I would love to be able to bring to District 11, is flipping the script. You don't graduate from the school to go in central office. You graduate to the school to then be able to coach and support the needs of schools. And so when you move up and out, and I met the principal at Jenkins yesterday, Darren, help me, Brian, what's his last name?
Joyner.
Right. He's on his way up. But that guy does not want to get out of the building. He wants to be a part of what's still happening in teaching and learning. And so I think you get the feedback from your team that says, we are delivering the coaching and the collaboration to ensure that instruction, as measured by these assessments, whether I want them or not, is giving me the feedback on. And the thing that I was so happy to hear was the commitment of the district to the interim assessments. So this goes back to my academic plan on cycles. You can't wait. There's nothing more frustrating than knowing that a child isn't learning an objective and then just passively moving them along to say, well, I tried and they weren't responsive. Again, if you'd measured me on my potential in the 6th grade, I would not be the person I was. If you hold me accountable in the 5th grade to I didn't do my homework and then just say it's on me, that's not the relationship that we want. That's not loving kids. We know what kids need. We're going to give them the resources, and I want to hear from teachers what they need. When I was in Detroit, we flipped that script and we created network support teams. So we took the Bryans and the Jennifer, are you here? I think I met you yesterday. You're in the back there. And Sherry, you were one, but now you're an interim. And I haven't met Brandon. Is Brandon here? There we go. And am I missing one more? Oh, Darren's going to be the next one. Is that right? And I met Don yesterday. I would call them area superintendents. Area superintendents need resources. They need an instructional coach on their team that visits schools. They need somebody from special education. They need somebody from the assessment team, I forget what you all call it here, that understands how to generate the numbers. You wrap those supports around schools and classrooms and you'll get results, because then you own the problem. This is about owning the problem. Having the humility to say that I need help. And when central office shows up, you should feel that they're there to help. And I heard that comment at a board meeting, and everybody laughed because there's irony when it's said here. It's sarcasm when somebody says, I'm here from central office, I'm here to help. And everybody's like, well, that's not what I get from central office. We'll flip that, and we'll flip that because it's the first free move. Because remember, in all these conversations, there's no money tree in the backyard. You don't hire the new superintendent with $1 million to come in and solve the problem. You hire the new superintendent, I need a free move. The free move is there are really smart, qualified people at central office. Let's go surround, maybe we just start with the priority schools, maybe we just start with the lowest enrollment schools. Let's go and let's get after it, because I guarantee you that the answers are here in the district. They just need to be synthesized together.
All right, next we have a community question. How do you define equity, and how will you address equitable practices as the superintendent in D11? Please
Great.
give specific examples.
Oh, I can't wait to give specifics on this. Equity has become a very charged term in our country for a variety of political reasons. The simple reality is equity is a verb, and the verb is putting your money where your mouth is. What does the district want to be about, and are you funding that? It can cover a million different topics. And so examples that I was able to deliver on, when I was in Washington, D.C., I owned the budget, and we had a weighted student formula that basically was a peanut butter spread. Every time you got an extra dollar, a penny went here, 5 pennies went there, and it was all very programmatic. But what we saw is that in our priority schools, there was a greater need, and we weren't able to program the more dollars that were needed. So we created an Excellence for Equity fund and put it into our weighted student formula that created an exponential opportunity for direct dollars to go to schools of higher need. Not a linear. So not if I have 10 more kids, I get 10 more pennies. As soon as you got over 25% of your student population not meeting the standard, then you got on that accelerant path. And we created a floor for that, because all the principals in the audience, or whenever you listen to this, a principal will take $10,000 if you give them $10,000, but they can't do anything with $10,000. So our floor was an FTE. If you fell into the Excellence for Equity Fund formula, the minimum you were going to get was an FTE. And then it was a conversation between that principal and the area network superintendent on where it would go. Is your focus going to be on math? Is it going to be on ELA? Do you need it for special education? Where is it that you need those dollars? And so I love to play with the numbers and do that math to be able to see how you can drive that equity. But equity is just matching and aligning your resources against your strategy. And so you'll see this happen all the time in districts. And I've seen this because I've led in 3 and I have sold and partnered to hundreds. And they will say, this is the year of literacy. And then you'll ask for their staffing roles, and you'll see that they have more vacancy in literacy teachers than they do in any other department. So it's not really the year of literacy. And there's no equity that matches the strategy. And so equity becomes political talk of what I say I'm going to do without any accountability to what I am going to do. And so I had the good fortune of having lunch today with the interim superintendent, and we talked about the ESSER funds. And I said, I love 33 reading interventionists. What a great use of those dollars. And then I said, are all 33 hired? Where are they hired? Where are they not hired? What are we doing to hire them where they aren't hired? I could almost bet that there's not one in some of the priority schools or low enrollment schools, and I'm pretty sure that there are some in the more affluent 80 and 90% utilization schools. We need to change that equity. We need to be driving that as administration that says, I want an action plan on when we're going to have all 33 reading interventionists hired, because the school year just ended and Summer Bridge starts, and I want every one of those reading interventionists to be on the Summer Bridge team. Now, I don't know if that's in the plan or it's not in the plan, but that's equity, driving your action against what you say you're going to do.
Thank you. So looking at the clock, we are about 35 minutes in. So just giving you a...
I'll go faster. I think we got
That's
the big
okay.
ones out of the way.
You're doing good. Can you provide us with some examples of how you have effectively turned around facets of a large organization, and were these efforts sustainable?
Yeah, I love the term sustainable. One of the things that I hate about the way K-12 is built is its reliance on personality instead of process. There needs to be a balance. I won't talk a lot about my military experiences, but the military gets succession planning and continuity like nobody's business, because the nation depends upon it. And so I was the greatest commander the military ever had until the day I wasn't the commander anymore, and the next person was now the next greatest commander. And they kind of ran things about the same, and they put their little twist in it, and maybe it was a little better for some and a little worse for others. My specific examples in Detroit, when I came into Detroit, again, I brought in a network support team model. I took my team, we literally built a schedule that was communicated to the elementary schools that said, we'll be at your school on Monday, we'll be at your school on Tuesday, we'll be at your school on Wednesday, and we created a rhythm that schools knew when the network support team was going to be there. It was not only instrumental in turning around the academic performance for the schools, but it created a level of trust. And one of the things that I've uncovered in my time here in 2 days is I'm sensing a lot of internal strife around enrollment and academic performance, and it's degrading trust. And if we don't trust each other, if I don't trust the 7 board members and the several thousand members of the district, and they don't trust me, then the students are left out in the cold. And remember, the students don't ever seem to get a vote in that. So we need to be able to drive trust into everything that we do. So I was able to build the trust with schools. And again, this is my first soiree into public education. I retired from the Pentagon on a Friday, and Monday morning I was in Detroit Public Schools. And so you want to talk about having to establish trust. The other way I did that is, even outside of the network support team, I don't like my office. I never liked my office. I don't like my office when I was in the military. I don't like my office when I was in private business. I have to be out and about. You have to walk a mile to understand somebody else's journey. And I used to do this when I was in D.C. The chancellor had a private vehicle that would drive him from place to place. I took public transit all the time because I wanted all our students took public transit. There were no yellow buses. So I wanted to understand how hard was it for a student to get to school. And when you find out that it takes 45 minutes for a kid to go 5 miles because they're taking public transportation, oh, and by the way, as soon as you get out of the metro station, you've got drug paraphernalia over there, you have some illicit activity over there, and this is a middle school, so kids are 12 years old walking past it every day. You learn a lot by walking a mile, so I've done that as well. Give me, which question number are we on again? I want to refocus.
Number 7.
Number 7. Because I had, what else have I done to be sustainable? My time, I'm very proud of, very quickly in Oakland, I flipped back to school. Every principal came to me and they're like, I can't get my sheet signed off. And the sheet was, I got to go see this functional in central office, I got to meet this person in central office, and they couldn't get it done because central office was, well, I got a doctor's appointment and I went to lunch, and so we created a 2-day event. We put all of central office in the center, and then had everybody be able to go around and get everything signed off. So no more excuses. Central office is there to support the needs of schools, instead of schools are there to report to central office. So we did that. And then at DC, the proudest thing that I love to share is in the last couple of months I was there, I brought 1,000 new seats to DC public schools through 3 things, and this really brings in sustainability. One, we brought in an early college opportunity. We were able to get the offset funding that we needed through private donation. We actually, politicked and campaigned for that, and we put them in an underutilized school in one of the lower performing wards east of the Anacostia, which actually drew higher performing students and socioeconomic east of the river, which we got 2 bangs for $1 on that. Secondly, we made a horse trade in our capital plan, which is similar to your facilities master plan, where we had a capacity limited IB school that was bursting at the seams, but the historical nature of the building, nobody would let us add on to the building. And then we had a vacant lot with an old middle school that the community kept telling us, build a new middle school, but we didn't need a new middle school. The numbers didn't demand for it. But they wouldn't let us do anything with that lot. So what we did is we then built a brand new high school, an IB diploma school, Banneker High School, on that empty lot, and we gave the historic building to the people who wanted the small middle school. So we made a horse trade, and I'll never forget the comment from the mayor. She said, that's the freshest idea I've heard in 5 years. And that was just because I looked at the numbers and said, why are we letting ourselves be limited by our own obstacle? And then the final piece is we had a charter that was closed on a Tuesday, and I spent a year establishing relationships with the charter leaders, even though we were kind of at war with them. And instead of just closing that school and dispersing those 600 kids into all the other district schools, which still would have been a win for us, we actually just took over the governance of that school, and we took our principal of the year, and we paid her an extra stipend, and she took that school over, and she took it to new heights. So we preserved the community for children and families and didn't make it a we win and families lose. Because I really didn't care where the kids went, so we added those extra 600 seats there as well. If we have 3 more hours, I'll give you 3 more hours.
Okay, thank you. Can you discuss what is the proper balance between parents' rights or beliefs and the expectations or requirements of the school district when they are not aligned?
Yeah, thank you. COVID gets credit or blame for this. We were humming along in public education, and most parents were generally happy, or at least the majority of parents were happy. And then COVID happened, and now suddenly every parent in America got eyes on what was happening in the classroom every day. And for some, that meant they had great empathy and leaned in to help the schools. And then for others, they were like, you can't say that to my kid, or that's not how I want this to happen. So balance, I think, is the answer to the question, which had the word balance. But I think it comes from communication. I think the other thing that we got lazy, as well as I did as an administrator, is we were humming along, and we weren't making the efforts to increase our communication channels. I've watched board meetings, and although I don't quite have the long vision that I used to, I can't quite put the faces out there. When I watch it on TV, there's the same people who come to the microphone all the time. I want your voice. I want more of your voice. But where are the other voices in the, how many people live in Colorado Springs? 500,000, 600,000, something like that. Where are all those other voices? I think it's on the district to start to map and say, wait a second, we have a giant hole right here. We could do some geo-mapping by the way people email and the phone calls that we get, and when they sign up for public comment, and say, it's really interesting that, Michael's comment that the Southeast Corridor is kind of struggling. We're not getting a lot of voice from the Southeast Corridor. So how do we overcome that? I don't know. We do a barbecue. We do a ribbon cutting event. We do a town hall. There are ways for us to build those bridges. Ultimately, we're accountable to parents. I really think we're accountable to students, but again, students don't get to vote for board members. Students don't get to vote for bonds. Parents do. So I think if we can be very clear in what is our strategy and what we want to do, then I think there'll be much more clarity on where that balance falls on who gets authority. I mean, by the bylaws, we're charged to do this. You're voted in, this is the board. You're going to select a superintendent who's the only employee of the board. We're going to go after it. And so I'll end with a quippy statement, which is there's never a wrong day to do the right thing. And if you've been charged and given the authority to do the right thing, vote your conscience and do it. and we'll work together to get it done. If we're wrong, let's have the cycles that I said we should have in schools and let those make those adjustments. I think the community would give us a little bit of latitude to be able to do that, but let's not be ignorant to our own decisions.
How will you empower staff members to achieve our vision for success, and how will you hold them accountable?
Empowerment's great. One of the things I always love to clear up for people is just because I'm in the military and because I talk fast and have a lot to say doesn't mean it's my way or the highway, especially as a non-traditional. I know what I don't know. First and foremost, we have to operationalize every policy and every strategy priority in the district. Maybe they're there, but I just can't find them on the website. I can't find a dashboard that's giving me the KPIs. Now, I can go into the UIPs, and I've been digging around in there, but it's really problematic. You know, I got so many tabs open on my MacBook here that it takes 5 minutes to warm up as soon as I open it up. So we have to operationalize that. I did that in Oakland, and we carried it to DC. We created cross-cutting, cross-functional team of teams around all our strategic priorities. What I learned in my time in 3 different sectors is no subject matter expert ever has the full picture to completely answer the problem. They can inform the decision, but you need outside perspective. One of the earlier questions was, what's the thing that you celebrate or you love about District 11? I love that it celebrates diversity, but I know I'm the outlier candidate because I bring a diverse perspective. So there's some irony there that actually it's the diverse perspective that will allow you to take a cross-functional team that says, wait a second, did anybody talk to IT about what's ever happening with Power School? I don't know what's happening with Power School, so I'll write my own story here. But everybody's struggling with Power School because maybe we haven't asked the right person on what's the challenge with Power School. So what we did is we put together work groups. They were cross-functional. We used a model that had an accountable member. All this was transparent. It's all available on the webpage. Accountable, responsible, coordinated, and informed. Color-coded it, reported on it. Every board meeting, a strategic priority or work group gave an update to the board. So we didn't save it all for the end of the year. Then my cycles are too slow. Every board meeting starts with strategic priority A, increased academic performance. Sherry, you're the interim right now. Sherry, go. Sherry stands up and says, okay, here's my team. Here's the work that we've done. And it's not just everybody that works for Sherry. It's Sherry, and it's somebody from the ops team, because none of the smart boards work. And it's somebody from the community engagement team, because parents aren't engaging. It's a very empowering way. If you want to look it up, the idea is really called a holacracy, which is the organization is not built by hierarchy. It's built by skills and attributes. And there have been a lot of businesses that have adopted that, which says you might be the leader, but you might not be in charge because you don't have the right skill sets for it. And so my role as a leader is to empower the power and the knowledge of this team to solve the very problems that they know. I didn't say anything to Brian or anybody that I met that wasn't something that they already knew. Yep, you're right. Yep, oh, you're right. Yep, we see that. They know what the answers are. We just need to bring the right groups together to be able to solve it. And we owe it to the community to be able to share that with them. How do I hold them accountable to that? Well, in my world, accountability goes up the chain and accolades go down the chain. So if it's not working, it's my fault. I'm more than happy. I've been fired before. I've been hired before. I've been yelled at before. I've been clapped for before. It's not about me. It's about the kids. So if there's a personal issue with somebody in their performance, we'll handle that on the side. I'll let you all know what's happening. My goal is that we empower our people to be their best self and to exceed their own potential, that what we're doing is we're moving forward and we're not picking on what's not working. But I'm sure whatever is the annual evaluation form exists, and I'm happy to talk with all the union reps on what those are and continue to move those forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a community question. Like many school districts, District 11 is dealing with staffing shortages. What are some strategies or steps you will take to recruit and retain high-quality staff? Please cite specific strategies you have successfully used in your prior work.
Great, thank you. Recruit, train, and sustain are the 3 bullets that I use when it comes to staffing. And it's not just teachers, it extends beyond that. The thing that I'd really like to talk about on this is the idea of growing your own. There are so many strong universities in the area. I got my master's from UCCS. I got my undergraduate from the Air Force Academy. For every year that I lived here as a cadet, I just wanted to meet a girl that went to Colorado College. Sorry. Probably pull that off the record. But the idea there is there's really strong universities here that I think we need to double down and create relationships. Growing your own. So let me give you a couple of examples. One, internal candidates that exist in the district. ESPs are awesome at growing into future roles within the district. They already work here. They know the culture. They love the work. So we should be providing out of time or after time or night school opportunities for ESPs to be able to advance their own career and grow your own. That's a little bit of a long game, so that can be a challenge when you have a staffing shortage. The other thing is we have to be smarter about our student-teacher relationships. We need to be placing student teachers in buildings where we know that there are going to be vacancies. And then your student-teacher year becomes a probationary year, such that if we like you and you like us, we've accelerated that. We did this in Washington, D.C. by extending the American University was our primary supplier of teachers, but we had limited them to one metro stop because we thought it was too much time away. So I met with the dean for the education school at American University, and if I extend this one more metro stop, I can get your student teachers into the schools where I know I'm going to have vacancies. Because if you haven't been to Washington, D.C., American University is in a beautiful part of town. And you can imagine that's where our highest performing elementary schools were that never had any vacancies, because I didn't want to leave there when I went to a visit. So we were actually able to expand that spine and get teachers into schools where they were really starting to learn what it was going to be like to be a teacher in DCPS. Because being a teacher in DCPS right next to American University was not where they were going to be hired. So it was a great opportunity to get acceleration in that student teaching year. And what we were able to do then is I think we halved our loss of student teachers in that following year. So we cut the loss of first-year teachers by 50%. So that's another thing that we're able to do. And I'm here in Colorado because of alternate certification. This is a state that sees that you can take outsiders I shouldn't say outsiders, you can take non-traditional candidates and you can get them the skills and the training that they need to ensure that they are able to deliver. I believe, Brian, it was either you or someone that I met yesterday said that they entered into the system on an alternate teaching certification. We need to be expanding that. That's the fastest way to get people into the system. And if we take my idea of leaning central office into schools, then we can make sure we don't leave them there to fail. That's a real challenge, is when you tell somebody, here you go, and then you close the door and leave them alone. But it's a real problem. It's not going to get better. Teachers are leaving, in droves, and hopefully that's a question. And I'll talk about how we can change the culture to make sure that teachers feel more valued.
Okay, name one or two strengths or skills you possess that make you the best candidate for District 11. What coaching supports, if any, do you think you need to be successful as a superintendent?
Yeah. I think the skill that I bring is I'm able to see problems at a strategic level very quickly. I have found that many organizations suffer from paralysis through analysis. In the consulting work that I've done with companies over the last few years, I tell them that the future in K-12 is figuring out how to provide recommendations on actionable data. Districts are drowning in data right now, and they don't know what to do with it. One of my skill sets is to be able to look at data and look at a situation and say, that's the root cause of the problem. What coaching do I need on that? I need context.
It's like what coaching supports you may need, not on that alone, on anything.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that, Dr. Melpacum. I'm new to the district. I have a lot to say because that's the game here. This is not how I lead. I don't run my meetings this way, but this is the structure. You want me to say as much as I can to differentiate myself from two other candidates. This is not how I run a meeting. I loved my time over the last 2 days because I was able to watch and learn from the people who are here. Context matters. Location matters. Anybody in real estate? Location, location, location. I need to learn the history of District 11, every decision that has happened up until this date is exactly the right decision from my perspective, because I wasn't here for the decisions beforehand. So don't ask me what I think about Dr. Thomas. I don't know Dr. Thomas. I don't know what he was hired to do. I don't know what he was charged to do. I know what the situation looks like if I were hired, and I know what I want to do. But I need the seeing eye dog walking next to me that says, watch out. That's what happened there. And poor Brian got me 10 o'clock at night on Sunday when I'm still driving around, and I think the last place I landed was Wasson, and I was like, tell me this used to be a high school, because it sure looks like an old high school. And he's like, yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But like, you need context. And so the coaching that I would need if I were to get this job is I need to make sure I understand the decisions that were made and why they were made to get there. And if we're going to make a different decision going forward, that nobody was wrong for that decision. It's just the agenda of the district going forward. That's the focus that we're talking about here. That's the call to action. That's the urgency. We need to do it differently because what was done before, the results weren't there. Let's understand that. And so it's the difference between a reason and an excuse. A reason is you have information and data, and it informs what you do next. An excuse is you have information and data, and you do the matrix move, and you say, it wasn't my fault. And so we want to get to reasons.
All right, this is question 12 out of 24, just a reminder, and we have been here about an hour, so we have half an
Great,
hour left.
thank you.
Could you discuss with us your communication strategy with the people you serve, including internal and external stakeholders of the district? And how do you know when your communication is effective?
Yeah, I'll go backwards. I love watching body language. It's very interesting. I'm an eye contact person. You can see if people are hearing you, and you can see if they're agreeing you or disagreeing with you. I think as we all start on a central why, if we share a why, I'm okay if you disagree with me as long as you're still looking at me, because then I know we can get there. If you won't look at me when you disagree with me, then I think there's a bit of a challenge. I'm very direct in my communication. I think that's because my training as a pilot is every word matters. So you have to say what you want to say when you want to say it. I think that plays well here because I think we need some urgency. But I have certainly been given feedback that says, maybe you're a little too direct. But if I'm representing 26,000 kids in the district, I just don't think I can get direct enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it
Trying
comes
to get
to me.
shorter, thanks.
Yeah,
Director Ott.
yeah, you're doing good. So, community question, how will you judge your own effectiveness as a superintendent? And in your opinion, how should the board measure your success at the end of 1 year and at the end of 5 years?
Yeah. First, I measure the holes in the bottom of my shoes and the sweat stains on my shirt at the end of the day. I know how hard the work is. I love the heart of the work. I love the walk of the walk. So I am very hard on myself. If you were to ask anybody that's worked for me or in my personal life, nobody's harder on me than I am. I have extremely high expectations of what I'm able to do and provide for folks in the service-centered world that I have committed to. I think, what was it, 3 years and 5 years you said?
1 year and
1
5
year.
years.
I think 1 year is we have to be able to show this next year that we have stopped or trended the enrollment in a better direction. It might not be every school, it might not be every part of the town, but we need to be very specific on what our strategy is. We can't come back and say, you know what, we're actually worse than the demographer said we would be in 2018. I saw that report. Ironically, the district is only within 200 or 300 kids of where the demographer said they would be in 2018. So the forecast is clear. We need to switch that trend, and there are some strategies that we can get to it. In 3 and 5 years, academic performance has to be improved, and it has to be specifically improved for the kids that need it the most. I saw what happened in the pandemic. I have 3 children. One of my kids is a doctoral student at George Mason University back east. She didn't care about the pandemic because all she does is code. She's in atmospheric science. So her life was remote before the pandemic. So she never could go to campus. Didn't bother her at all. She's been self-motivated. She's got a lot of agency. Didn't bother her at all. My youngest is a music student, is a music education student at Washington State University. You know what the pandemic did to him? You can't play the violin over Zoom. You just can't do it. You certainly can't teach an elementary kid an elementary student who's never picked up a violin how to play it when you're a music education major. It destroyed him. So I think we have to be very specific on where we want our success academically, and we need to see that see it trending after a year, but we have to have results. And we should be very public about what those expectations are. And so if it's 5 and 9%, it's got to double in 2 years. It's got to be 10 and 18%, right? And that sounds like a huge lift, but we can get there with the right strategies, and then we can get there very quickly. And my accountability, I have no problem, whatever the board wants that to be, at will. You want to fire me, you get to fire me. You know, I'm not here for the job, I'm here for the work. So if you don't want me for the work, then I'm happy to not be here anymore.
Thank you. So this is another community question. Nationally, there has been debate about personal values and social issues in K through 12 classroom lessons and discussions. What are your thoughts on the responsibility of public education in this aspect? Please elaborate with some examples.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple examples here. Gazette-Telegraph reporter asked me the same question, or a very similar question right before we came in. And the focus of the school district is to educate the youth of America to be the future workforce for Colorado Springs, the Front Range, and the United States that we live in. That's the national crisis. The Secretary of Education is quoted as calling it the greatest risk to our country. We know that that work needs to be done. Anything that we do has to be an extension of that work. I know that our children, many of our children, need more supports than just the best math or ELA instruction that they can get. I understand that sometimes behaviors are manifestations of challenges that kids bring to school. We have the skills and we have the teams. We've always had those teams in place. I remember talking to guidance counselors. I remember, you know, being in the principal's office for doing the wrong thing. I remember those structures being in place. What District 11 wants to be careful in is making sure that we use the two-step strategy. There are 2 steps to the basket in basketball. Whatever you're doing has to be within 2 steps to the academic outcome. If you believe a student needs X, Y, or Z, and you can tell me within 2 steps on how that's going to get us to increase performance, I'm all in. But we can't spin our wheels and say, I'm going to go solve a problem that I can't be responsible for solving. If we have open space in schools, yes, we should have community schools and clinics in our schools to provide supports that students and families in some neighborhoods do not have. Should that be the primary focus of the principal? Absolutely not. The principal is the instructional leader in the building. We will find an agency with the city government or with the local HMO and hospitals to be able to provide those supports. They are ancillary. The core work is that we get back to instruction. Yes, we need those ancillary supports, but we have to make sure our language always gets us to the strength of the academic performance and the growth of the student. Students will respond to it, teachers will respond to it, and we can continue to provide the social, emotional, and whole child supports that we need to be able to get them there.
Whew.
I feel like we all need jumping jack break. Everybody tired? Remember, I'm on East Coast time.
Just thinking the same thing, like I need a dance break or something.
And there was no coffee out front.
Sinners.
Thank you. As our superintendent, what steps would you take to gain a better understanding of the school district and community? And how can you be a positive ambassador for our school district?
This was a question that came up in one of the video tutorials, and so I'm very comfortable. The framework that I use is look, listen, and learn. And so look, I've already started that. I drove around, saw every school. I've got my little map in my head. I kind of digitize things that way. I see where the challenges are. I see where the challenges aren't. Listen, we need a robust campaign for the new superintendent to understand the challenges of all communities. That's a listening tour. It's not a Mike Gaal talking tour. The last 2 days have been a Mike Gaal talking tour. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of telling everybody what I think. I want to hear what everybody else thinks. But we need tools to be able to categorize that. We have to stop just thinking what we heard, and it's not just who shows up to the meeting. We talked about this in geo-mapping, where the voices are coming from. We need to be taking inputs in, by multiple mediums and then categorizing them, coming up with word walls, feeding them back to the system. And the final thing that I always add in is learning. I will do a line-by-line review of the entire budget, of every program, of every partnership that we have, and I will ask whoever is the Office of Responsibility, what is your measure of success, and how do we know whether or not we should renew that or not renew that? One of the greatest challenges that I've seen in public education that I was happy to change when I was in DC was this idea of the budget is just 5% more or less than it was last year. Who says last year's was right? Why am I using that? I like zero-based budgeting. Now, you're going to put some big rocks in it. You remember Covey's demonstration where you put the big rocks in first, and then the medium rocks and the smaller rocks, and then they finally pour some liquid in. You can fit a lot into your budget if you do zero-based budgeting. But if you're just trimming off the fat every year, you're only going to get an incremental change. And I think that's really the challenge here, is that the District 11 needs a systems-level leader who's not afraid of transformational change instead of just incremental change. We don't need a 2% change in anything. We need 15, 20% changes.
Thank you.
This is a community question as well. Describe your beliefs about student discipline, and how do you balance addressing student behavior issues in the classroom with the maintenance of an effective instructional environment?
This is the 90-10 rule, right? You can't spend 90% of your time on 10% of the kids. And so I would support the district discipline policy, but I would like to see that operationalized. And so I would say my overall critique of all the policies that I've found is they're very similar to policies that I've implemented in other districts, but there's no meat underneath it. So it says we desire, we presuppose, we hope for, but then it's my job or the superintendent's job to build in that operationalization of what that plan looks like. So I'll go to a specific example because it's relevant on the tragedy that we saw happen in Texas today. In the district that's just north of Detroit, several months ago, there was a student that had made some violent ideations in his communication on an assignment to the teacher, as well as some internet searches that the school recognized. So this is a passive way that they recognized that there was a challenge, and they called the student into the principal's office with the counselor and the parents, and then nobody went to check the student's backpack. And so after, when everybody leaned in and hugged and said that they wanted to love and support, nobody went through the basic protocol that said, there's a challenge here, there might be a risk and a threat, maybe we should check the locker in the backpack. And the student left, went to his backpack, and shot a couple of kids in the school. That's a horrible situation. Now, I translate that over to, I grew up in the 80s, so I always remember just say no to drugs, right? I challenge that if a student walks into a building and they're glassy-eyed and they look like they're high on marijuana, I promise you 11 people are going to go check that locker. And if their car's on grounds, they're going to say, like, check the car as well, because we're programmed that way. We need to make the connection to the challenges that students are presenting in their behaviors and what the risks are that are associated with that. So the 90-10 rule is no teacher can handle spending 90% of their time dealing with behavior. This, again, is where a network support team can be helpful in that. It is very difficult for a teacher to differentiate, individualize, and personalize instruction, which is what we ask them to do. When I add in multiple layers of discipline or behavior with nobody actually implementing the policy that's on record, then I'm putting all that on the backs of the teachers. That's not how teachers are going to be successful. Teachers need that peeled away from them to know. Now, that doesn't mean that children are expelled because they had a failure of the disciplinary policy. It just means that we need teachers to be teaching and other systems to support where those other challenges are. These are systems that we can bring in. They exist. We can go to neighboring districts. We can do the school walks. We can look at where's a district that's had high behavior or disciplinary issues and how did they handle that. That, again, is about humility and asking for help to be able to solve a problem, because it's impossible to expect myself as a superintendent or the next superintendent to have all those answers lined up themselves. So I think, I'd love to be able to explore that. But it's really about let's implement our policy, and then let's measure and see where we need to make improvement.
Please give us an example of a plan that you implemented that did not turn out as you anticipated. What did you learn from this experience? What would you have done differently to change the outcome?
Yeah, I made the mistake as a chief operating officer that thinking that saving $100,000 was going to improve my position on finances. And so we were making, we had external facilities management, and so we decided to go away from one vendor to another for a very marginal amount of savings. And I did that because the mistake that I made is I didn't actually listen to the needs of the schools, and I just listened to the sale of the vendor. And so it's one of the things that I actually then learned coming out of the private sector that I think that I can bring as an advantage to District 11. Vendors and partners are very good at convincing you that their product and service matches your problem. But oftentimes, your problem or our problem is much more unique and nuanced. And what you need is a partner that comes in and says, I have a basic solution that I'm going to customize to you. So I call this square peg and round hole. Your job in sales in the private sector is to hammer your square peg into somebody else's round hole. The district owns the lever. You're the one that gets to decide. It's not the vendor that gets to decide. That's been flipped, and it's been flipped because the most reliable revenue from a business perspective is government. School districts pay their bills 99% of the time, 99% on time. And so why would business not want to be a part of that? I have seen certain service companies provide extremely low service and nobody call them out. And then I've seen student representative on a board, all these names I'm going to hold off because I don't want to get sued by anybody, in a district say that the service provided by that service provider was horrible. At which point the X number of school board members said, you're right, we need to do something about that. But then the representative for that business happened to be in the audience, and then they gave their salesman's pitch side of the story. And then 10 minutes later, consent agenda, contract renewed. The student who sits and represents, now might not have been the collective 30 or 40,000 voices, but said, this really isn't that good. And the board listened to that, but then got sold. So we have to stop being sold to, and we need to be partnered with.
Good.
This is a community question. We hear that many high-achieving students are not staying in D11 schools and are finding academic support and relevant education in other schools. How will you attract and retain these students and provide them with rigorous and tailored education to meet their needs?
Yeah. Well, the first time I got asked this question, it was this idea of what's going well in District 11. And I said, I love the strength of the gifted and talented program. I love the strength of the arts programming. I love the commitment. I was at Palmer High School yesterday. My daughter's an IB diploma graduate. It literally changed her commitment to her academic experience. And as I cited earlier, she's the one that's a doctoral student. And she barely passed her IB, got her IB diploma. So it's not like she was knocking it out of the park. We need to talk more about it. And so there's this phrase that I use, which is in most systems, it's fairly easy to remove the ceiling for high achieving learners, and it's really hard to raise the floor. But what happens is the majority of the voice in a system goes to raising the floor because it's really hard work. We need to celebrate the successes and where they're happening. And again, you could just look at the enrollment numbers. Families that live near Doherty High School stay in Doherty High School at almost 10 or 15% higher, well, actually much higher than Mitchell High School. So we have to find the things that are working well and we have to celebrate them. There are strong things happening at Mitchell High School. I can't wait if I get the job to meet the high school ROTC at Mitchell High School. Clearly, that would resonate for me. We need to be telling that story. I met Deborah earlier. She sat me in the break room, and I said, look, I'm getting the cart in front of the horse. I don't know if I'm getting the job, but if I get the job, we are going to be storytellers. We're going to storytell all day long. I have to admit it, and I'm a social media guy. I'll be on Facebook, I'll be on TikTok, I'll do all those things. They're addictive. But I don't ever see anybody telling their school stories there. I think it'd be a great way for us to celebrate that and to be able to get that out in the community. And I think as soon as you do that, you'll communicate to families that there are successful programs here. again, you make a really conscious decision that says, honey, I'm driving Susie, Steve, or Sally X number of miles to school every day until they get their own car. Oh, and by the way, think of the inequity in the fact that I can provide my high school student a car to be able to do that. That doesn't exist everywhere. So we have to communicate where our successes are, and I talked about this earlier. It's not on the marketing team and it's not on Deborah. It's on all of us. Every one of us needs to say it. I said this to Director Daniels a moment ago when I met her, more than a moment, it's over an hour now. And I said, I love seeing the energy around the board since they have made a board priority to visit schools. When you're in schools, you're happy. You're happy to be in schools. You love seeing students engage with teachers. Seeing learning happening real time is an exciting opportunity. I guarantee every one of these board directors has found a problem in every school that they have visited. They're going to write it down, they're going to pull the principal aside, they're going to get the chief operating officer, facilities and transportation, they're going to communicate that, and we're going to solve it. If we're in schools together as a team, we'll solve the problems, we'll celebrate it, everyone will see it. Remember that the most contagious disease in America is apathy. And so if you are apathetic, it goes through the room like that. If you want to be a winner, it takes a lot. You got to work at it every day. I want to be in a winning district, and we're going to do that together.
So another community question. Leaders often have to make unpopular decisions, sometimes at the spur of the moment. What are factors that will guide your decision-making process, and how will you communicate that to the stakeholders?
Yeah, great, thank you. I'm going to try to move quickly through this. Everything has to start on the same why. I think it's Simon Sinek's circles, the why, the how, the what. If we don't all have the same why, we have a lot of problems. I was telling Dr. Mel Packham that I've been watching the board interact in reverse order. So I watched the most current one from when I dropped my application maybe a month or so ago, and then I moved myself backwards. And I was like, oh, I might have done this the wrong way, because when I got to like February or March, I was like, I don't know if I even want to apply for that job. But what I saw is a board that's committed to a why, and so they're starting to work together. You should all have different opinions on the how, and we all have a very different opinion on the what. But we need to work together on the how, and it's okay to have a different opinion. When we get to a board decision, 4-3 is a decision and it's a policy, which means then, as a senior governance team, you empower the superintendent to implement that decision. That's on the record. You can have a dissenting opinion, but the way that we deal with that then is every policy and every plan that we put in place should have KPIs and action plans that we're going to measure, and the dissenting opinion should be the first person that's holding the board accountable. That says, you know what, I voted no for that, and we're 3/4 of the year in, and you know what, looks like we're not getting that growth. Now, you don't do that to undermine the decision, you do that to inform the decision. This goes back to the idea of having reasons instead of excuses. The reason is, and then we collectively improve or maybe abandon and stop, and then we move on to a different piece. The next piece is data. Arnie Duncan said in his book years ago that data never tells the full story, but it never lies. And so we have to believe the data. But we also have to understand what are the anomalies in the data and why do they exist. If one thing out of 100 shows this and the other 99 show that, we have to generally believe that this is what the data is telling us. I have to understand what that one anomaly is, but I'm probably not going to make my decision on the one. I have to understand what that piece is. Again, I think this district is rich in data. I would love to see at the board meetings, and maybe it's just because I'm seeing them visually, you don't get to see the slides. And so you hear conversations when the strength of the from the district comes up in briefs, you hear what they say, but you don't see the slide. And so there might be data that's available, but I'm not seeing it, and then it's very difficult in board docs to, you know, open up documents and follow along. But always having the data at the center. Start with the why, as long as everybody agrees, this is why we're here, what we want to do. We all agree that the data is going to drive the decision, and when the data drives it, then we all support it.
Okay, what strategies do you find most successful in resolving disagreements, disputes, or conflicts? And in the age of social media, how will you handle the backlash and criticism you'll likely receive for unpopular decisions?
Yeah. Unfortunately, conflict is a part of the work. Yeah. I have very thick skin because I believe very strongly in my why, but I'm also open to input. I think we all have to recognize that any time you have been critiqued, there is at least 1% of truth in what somebody said to you. You might not like the way they said it, you might not like the way it felt, but dig to understand what that 1% is. It usually doesn't happen until the next morning, right? We all have that giant belly button that, press here to really, set me off. Understand what your belly button is and then have skills to be able to come off of that. But then I just default back to the previous question. We start on the why. What's the mission and the vision statement of this district? Do you agree with that? I do too. What is it that you're actually challenging that I said right now? Do you not like the outcome? Let's identify that fear. I met with 4 different constituent groups yesterday, and the only one that didn't tell me that they were worried about losing their job was the DAC, and that's because we don't pay the DAC. They're all volunteers. But everybody is fearful of their own employability. I get it. It's hard to live in America without a paycheck, right? Nobody wants to lose their job. That doesn't mean that they're wrong to express that fear. If you acknowledge that and understand what it is, and as I said to most of the constituent groups, most changes that happen in school districts don't really result in the loss of a job because there's normally enough attrition that if you're committed and you're performing, there's another role or a similar role for you within the district. I love the fact that you're here and that you want to be here. Let's find a way for people to be able to resolve conflicts, centering on why we're here and understanding what is the risk that they feel they are taking at that particular time. Goes back to trust, which I talked about earlier. If you trust me, then you'll believe that we can resolve the conflict. And if we can't, I'm okay with agreeing to disagree. Unfortunately, even in those conversations that I had yesterday, somebody asked about how do you get feedback. I saw the body language. Not everybody liked what I had to say. I accept that. I don't expect 100% of the people to like the decisions that are made, but if people can at least articulate and say, the superintendent of the board made the decision X because of A, B, and C. They might not agree with it, but I'm fine with it. If they can articulate why we made that decision, and then again in the dissenting opinion that we talked about earlier, hold us accountable to it. I'm happy to be held accountable. I said it before, accountability goes up the chain and accolades go down as close to the student in the classroom as possible. If we turn around this district, when we turn around this district, I don't want an award. I want a giant party for all the teachers and principals and ESPs and DACs and exec pros that got that work done, right? I don't want anything for it.
Okay, what has been your experience with facilities evaluations and capital planning? And can you please share your thoughts about budgeting for facility improvements with limited financial resources?
Yeah, so we'll take it backwards. If you're out of money, then you just have to really understand what your dreams are. The strongest organizations that I have ever led, both in the military and in public education, had nothing to do with the facility that they were in. I wish that I could create a magic wand that said we could fund the facilities master plan as it's built. That money doesn't currently exist. The 11 votes on the bond in November is not an 11-vote loss. It's about a 10 or a 20,000 vote loss. You need the majority of your community to be supporting the actions that you're putting forward. So the community is telling you, we don't want to build new buildings right now because we're not satisfied with the performance in the buildings as they currently exist. Again, I think it would be wonderful if everybody had a state-of-the-art facility like we're in here today. This is the nicest high school that I've seen, but it's not a high school. It's a professional development center. Everybody deserves quality facilities. Can we get there? Yes, we can get there. Can we go to the community for a bond right now? Absolutely not. They just told us no. There needs to be a new team that shows that we're turning the district around. I promise you, if you improve academic performance and stem the loss of enrollment, the community will respond. Right now, that no vote, from my perspective, is a colossal vote of no confidence on what was happening in the district. So going back to the well right now is going to come up dry. And if you keep going back to the well, then we're the boy or the girl or the district that cried wolf. So the answer there is I know a ton about capital planning. I already gave the examples of what I did in Washington, D.C. I think there is a huge utilization challenge in the district right now. I think there are ways for us to overcome that. I don't think it means you have to close schools, but I do think you need to think about advancing opportunities or aligning the strongest programming to grow into the places with the most space. So it's about that example of why ever everybody left Christy McAuliffe to go to Henry. Let's dig into that, because good things are happening at Henry. And I only say that because I saw it at the board meeting. And I saw it because it fit my model. We're coaching for stronger instruction. Wow, and it's working, and everybody's super excited, and students are performing. So maybe we need to be expanding the opportunity for growth at Henry. But we have a lot of small schools. So you can't, sometimes you have to remember you can't change the hand that you're dealt. I drove the elementary schools. There are a lot of small schools. So the facilities master plan can't change that. You can't get rid of, there's got to be 50% of the schools, have got to be somewhere around 300 capacity. You can't change that. That's $1 billion bond just to rebuild all those elementary schools. And to what end? Yes, I would love to have, the average I think in America is 500 kids per elementary school, 800 kids to 1,000 for a middle school, and 12 to 1,500 kids for a high school, or bigger in a lot of suburban districts. We have a hand that we were dealt, so there's a lot of small schools. Take those small schools, pack them tight, make sure they're performing. Now that's not a problem. Now it's not a problem. If you have a small school that's underutilized, that's not performing, now we have a problem. But I have tons of experience with that. I'm happy to horse trade. I'm happy to move the strongest schools into the places where they get the most growth. If that meets the needs of the community, we have to understand the needs of the community. Again, 30% of the community right now is deciding to not go to their neighborhood school, which means that any decision that we make collectively as a board is going to have some positive impact on that. That's a huge number of people.
Thank you. What does an innovative culture in a school district look like to you? And can you describe some specific examples?
Yeah, we came in DC with an idea called the Design Lab. And so I'm an engineer, I got this crazy math mind, so I love this idea of continuous improvement cycles. It's how you fly an airplane, where am I, where do I need to be, and what went wrong. Plan to assess, that's the translation into instruction. Everybody knows that. What design thinking does is it takes it and it makes it a spiral, because it listens for feedback. It doesn't just take the data. Education is a very relational and personal engagement. So you have to have an empathetic ear. So we created, again, with funding from outside our DC Public Ed Fund, we were able to open up a design lab where we brought leaders of our most challenged schools and gave them a design thinking training and experience to innovate and become entrepreneurial for what they were going to do for their schools. And we did that, and we gave them a year to come up with their plan, and they pushed that forward. That design lab just recently partnered with, I think it's called Project XQ, which is a national effort to turn around failed high schools. And so it went from 13 schools to now having a national sponsorship, because design thinking can change the outcome for schools if you give people the resources and the time to be able to explore their own ideas. Nobody knows more than what needs to happen than the teacher in the classroom and the principal in the building. And so giving them the time and the space to be able to explore that, and the freedom of maneuver to be able to fail. So if we're failing at the level that we're failing right now, I'd rather try something new and find out that it didn't work than just continue to do more of the same. We all know, yeah. The definition of insanity, right?
Well, thank you.
That's the head nod.
Thank you,
Now you're
Michael.
done.
I'll call you by your first name. We are pretty much at the end of our time.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you some time. The board is going to give you some time for making your closing remarks. And is there anything else you feel we should know about your candidacy for this position that we haven't learned from your application materials or our time together today?
No, I think I've said a lot, and I think you'll get a lot of feedback from anyone that I've met over the time that I'm here. And I hope that most of it's positive, but I do know that the things that I say are challenging. And I do know that they're challenging to adults in particular. I believe the line I use in my cover letter is I'm not afraid to ask the hard questions to get the freshest answers. The expanded version of that is I'm not afraid to ask the hard questions for adults to get the freshest answers for kids, because that's the work that we do. I believe that everybody fundamentally feels the same way, but I'm sensing that there's a lack of trust, internal, external, cross-district, charter, district, CDE. I think if we can rally around a common why, when I decided to go into public education, somebody said to me, why is it that you want to come to public education? And I said, the ability to lead people on common mission and vision to a greater impact than my own self is the thing that motivates me every day. It's what drove me in the military, support and defend. We went over the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We have a domestic challenge that if we just keep doing what we've been doing, we are going to crash. The numbers are there. I know you all see the numbers. Don't be fooled by the ESSER dollars. The fiscal pressures that are coming down on public education are real. They're only going to get worse. We have to be in front of that. I believe it's Wayne Gretzky who said, I don't skate to the puck, I skate to where the puck's going to be. My forecast is we need to get in front of that. If you're not driving performance as your lead indicator and KPIs, then everything else is lagging and just doesn't make any sense. You can spend all day long patting yourself on the back for doing all the wrong things right. What I want to do is get the right thing right. I want to do it here in District 11. I know that people say you're not from here. I am from here. This is where I started. This is where I'm ready to end. So, and I'll end there.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Thank
It was
you.
a pleasure hosting you here, and thank you for taking the time to join with us today and answer some of our questions and the community questions too. With that, we come to the end of our meeting today, and the board will have, going forth, I mentioned this right at the top of the meeting, the board will have an internal discussion tomorrow. We have a board meeting tomorrow, and we have an executive session prior to that. So we, as a board, will collectively discuss some thoughts, feedback, and then we are also looking forward to hearing from stakeholders. Stakeholder survey will go live, if not tonight, by early tomorrow morning. So tomorrow morning. So I encourage all the community members to participate in that stakeholder survey, provide some feedback on your thoughts on all the candidates, because that informs our decisions too. And the video recordings of today's interviews will also be posted tomorrow morning if other people want to take a look at it. So thank you. And the board will, our current timeline is the board will probably end up calling a special meeting sometime next week after we had some time to process and reflect on what transpired today during the interview process and the stakeholder feedback. So after Memorial Day weekend is when we plan on announcing. Thank you, and have a good night.